stops me and he says, "This is a crime scene. We found a knife." And in that moment, all I said was, "What? Oh my God, he killed her." He said, "You know who did this?" I said, "Yeah."
Celeste Mano was just 23 years old, living in Melbourne, Australia. She was known for her kindness, creativity, and bright personality. Sadly, her life was taken in a brutal and senseless act of violence inside her own home. In the early hours of November 16, 2020, a man broke into Celeste's house through a bedroom window. This piece of shit attacked her while she was sleeping. A security camera captured him leaving the scene and an ambulance arriving shortly after. That man was a former coworker who had been obsessed with her. Despite blocking him on social media and making it clear she wanted no contact, he continued to harass her. Her family woke up to the horrifying scene, and despite emergency services arriving quickly, Celeste could not be saved.
Thing I just never heard. It was like a million pieces of glass just crashing, and all of a sudden I heard, oh. So I remember just going, "Celeste," and I just ran out of bed and I'm just screaming her name down the hallway. I go, "Celeste, sweetie, what happened?" And I realise that I'm running all over glass, I'm seeing blood. I still don't get it, and I'm pulling her out of the bed. She's not helping me at all, but I see all that glass, and so I thought I didn't want to drop her.
The man responsible was Louis Seiko, who later pleaded guilty to her murder. He had developed an unhealthy fixation with Celeste after briefly working with her and did not handle rejection well. His actions left her family, friends, and community devastated. In 2023, Seiko was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 30 years. While justice was served, no sentence could ever undo the loss of Celeste's life. Her mother, family, and supporters have since been strong advocates for better protections against stalking and harassment, hoping that no other family has to endure the pain they have suffered. Celeste Mano is remembered as a kind, loyal, and loving person, whose light continues to shine through the people who loved her most. On April 4, 2012, 49-year-old Layla Namaranian left her workplace in Chesterfield, Virginia at about 6:30 at night. Authorities believe she made it home safely to her house in Midlothian, since her car was later found parked inside the garage. But Layla never showed up for work the next morning, and from that moment on, she was never seen or heard from again. Inside her home, there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. However, her purse and both of her cell phones were missing. A coworker later told police that he had gone to Layla's house that evening, sharing dinner with her between 9 and 11 p.m. He was the last known person to see her alive. Within a week, both of her cell phones were discovered tossed along Interstate 95, a mile apart near the Henrico-Hanover County line. As investigators dug deeper, they focused on Michael Anthony Edwards, a man who had dated Layla for 2 years. Edwards had a violent criminal past stretching back to his teens, including robbery, abduction, and aggravated assault. In 1990, he was even convicted of malicious wounding after stabbing a former girlfriend and assaulting her young daughter, nearly killing them both. By early 2012, Layla and Edwards had broken up. Friends say Edwards didn't handle the breakup well. Layla confided that he had choked her during a fight, showed up at her home unannounced, and even threatened her life. In her personal diary, she admitted she was afraid of his jealousy and at times was too frightened to even stay in her own home. Phone records would later place Edwards near Layla's home for over 5 hours the night she disappeared, and also along I-95, right where her phones were found. When questioned, he initially lied about being there at all, but later admitted he had been parked outside her home in the early morning hours. Investigators found disturbing items inside his Cadillac: duct tape, cleaning supplies, towels, a bucket, and traces of blood. Cadaver dogs even alerted to the possible presence of human remains, but DNA testing on the blood came back inconclusive. Despite the mounting evidence, Layla herself was never found. She left behind her passport, cars, $85,000 in the bank, and a close relationship with her family, all pointing to foul play. In 2015, 3 years after her disappearance, Edwards was arrested and charged with Layla's murder. At his 2016 trial, the prosecution argued that Edwards had killed her in a jealous rage after seeing her with another man. Edwards, however, claimed innocence, saying he only wanted to show her a nice time. The jury didn't believe him. Edwards was convicted of second-degree murder in Layla's presumed death. To this day, her body has never been recovered, and her family continues to live without answers about where Layla is. Adrian Cox was last seen in Natchitoches, Louisiana, on February 14, 2020. He was driving a stolen black Nissan Altima when the police began following him on Interstate 49, which is south of Natchitoches. After a 22-mile pursuit, he crashed the car into a tree between mile markers 151 and 153, just south of Ajax, Louisiana. He then ran into the swampy, wooded surrounding area. There was a report that Cox was picked up by a female friend, but his family denied this. The last time they spoke to him was over the phone at 9:16 p.m. Cox told them he was lost in the woods. After that, his phone died. An extensive search of the area turned up no indication of his whereabouts. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some judgment because of his decision to steal a car, go on a police chase, and then run into the woods. Keep in mind, although Adrian didn't make good choices, he is still a human being who has family and friends who love him. If you have any information available, please contact your local authorities, because as of today, this case remains unsolved. On June 5th, tragedy struck in Hanahan, South Carolina. 33-year-old Caitlin Conrad Speck was asleep in her bed and completely defenseless when her husband, Matthew Speck, shot and killed her. This piece of shit also killed their dog, Bailey May, who was also completely defenseless. After the murder, Matthew tried to make it look like a violent home invasion. He even shot himself in the arm and torso to sell the story. But investigators quickly uncovered the truth. Detectives discovered that Matthew had been searching chilling methods of killing, including strangulation and cyanide poisoning. They also learned he had been having an affair and was planning to leave Caitlin to start a new life with someone else. All of the evidence pointed directly back to him, and he was arrested the very same day. In November 2024, Matthew Speck was found guilty of murder, animal cruelty, and weapons charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Caitlin was in love with Matthew. She spoke so highly of him on social media, posting things to show appreciation for him and calling him the love of her life, all for this man to kill her. She is remembered by family and friends as a bright, loving young woman whose life was stolen in a senseless act of violence. In March of 2000, Alice Stewart vanished from her home on Outrigger Drive in Merritt Island, Florida, and she hasn't been seen since. Alice relied on a wheelchair, and when investigators searched her home, they found it still there, along with her clothing, identification, and all of her personal belongings. It was immediately clear that she hadn't simply walked away. At the time, Alice's son, Carl Franklin Stewart, had been appointed as her caregiver. He was responsible for her care and had access to her bank account, receiving $500 a month to buy groceries and cover utilities. Alice often stayed in touch with her daughter, who lived out of state, and the two spoke regularly on the phone. But by February or March of 2000, those calls suddenly stopped. When Alice's daughter tried to reach her, Carl always had an excuse, saying Alice was asleep, upset, or just unavailable. Eventually, he stopped answering altogether. Worried, Alice's daughter contacted the Florida Department of Children and Families, and authorities soon got involved. When questioned, Carl refused to say where his mother was. At one point, he claimed she was being cared for by friends in Georgia, but he was never able to provide proof. Investigators soon turned their attention to Carl himself. He had a long criminal history, with more than 24 arrests in Florida for crimes ranging from battery and kidnapping to disorderly conduct. In Alice's case, he was charged with forgery, grand theft, and exploiting the elderly. He was later convicted of elder neglect and exploitation and sentenced to prison. Carl Stewart has since passed away, but the mystery remains. Alice Stewart's wheelchair, her belongings, and her entire life were left behind. Authorities believe foul play was involved, but her body has never been found, and her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. On August 19, 1992, 20-year-old Lori Jean DePies vanished without a trace in Appleton, Wisconsin. Lori had spent the evening with her boyfriend and some friends. Around 10:30 p.m., she drove her gray Volkswagen Rabbit to her boyfriend's apartment complex to meet him. Witnesses later reported hearing a loud scream in the parking lot around the time she arrived. Lori never made it inside. The next morning, her car was discovered in the parking lot locked, with a cup of soda sitting on the roof. But there was no sign of Lori herself. For years, her case went cold, until 2010, when convicted murderer Larry Dwayne Hall confessed to killing Lori. Hall was already serving a life sentence for another abduction and murder. He claimed he had kidnapped Lori that night and disposed of her body. But when police investigated, they couldn't find any physical evidence linking him to the crime. Without proof, no charges were ever filed. Despite Hall's confession, Lori's family has never received full closure. Her body has never been found, and the case remains officially unsolved. On May 6, 2007, Heather Riggio disappeared from her uncle's home in North Miami Beach, Florida. She packed her belongings into a laundry basket and got into a white SUV, driven by Clifton Bogus Jr., whom she referred to as her sugar daddy. Friends reported seeing Heather in Homestead, Florida about a week later, the area where Bogus lived. After that, she was never seen or heard from again. Bogus is considered a suspect in Heather's disappearance. Although he was married, he had been dating Heather and spent time with her at a Fort Lauderdale hotel just days before she vanished. He also had a violent criminal history. In 1997, he shot a woman in the head after she rejected his advances, earning a 5-year prison sentence for kidnapping and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Authorities say he has been uncooperative and refuses to be interviewed about Heather. Heather had a difficult upbringing. Her mother died in a car accident when Heather was 12, and her father was not involved in her life, so she was raised by her grandmother. At the time of her disappearance, she spent time in the Kendall, Homestead, and Redlands areas of Florida. Investigators describe Heather as someone who had gotten involved with the wrong crowd. Her friends were reportedly connected to drugs and possibly prostitution or human trafficking. Heather was a former exotic dancer and had a pending felony drug possession case. Authorities believe Heather is likely still in South Florida and theorize that she may have been murdered or accidentally overdosed after she went missing. Despite years of investigation, her case remains unsolved, leaving many questions about what truly happened to her. In January 1998, newlyweds Tom and Eileen Lonergan went on a scuba diving trip in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Tom was 27 and Eileen was 24, and the couple had been married just a few months. On January 25th, they went out on a dive with the company Tangalooma Blue Dive. But when the boat returned to port, Tom and Eileen were missing. Strangely, their absence wasn't noticed immediately. The crew assumed they were still on the boat and didn't report them missing until the next day, more than 12 hours later. A massive search was launched, but the couple was never found. Weeks later, their personal belongings and dive equipment were discovered washed up on a beach on the mainland, as well as a note they had written. Investigators believe that Tom and Eileen were accidentally left behind in the water and may have drifted out to sea. Tragically, this incident sparked changes in dive safety procedures. Many divers now require head counts and safety checks to ensure no one is left behind. The fate of Tom and Eileen Lonergan remains one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking stories in scuba diving history. While their bodies were never recovered, their story serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly a routine adventure can turn into a disaster.